I think we've just all about got our breath back. Goodness me, what an ending to what a day at Carrow Road. An incredible afternoon of football, an incredible 6 minutes of football, really, and fantastic Mr. Forson, the hero in the end. The 2-1 victory for Norwich City over Coventry. Their unbeaten start to 2025 continues, so it's all plain sailing from here, right? Welcome to the PinkUn.com. I'm still speechless by what we saw. Welcome to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, brought to you by First Bus. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy Davitt, Seaman and Adam Harvey. Let's go to our Coventry fan first and foremost. Paddy, you had Giannis off top apologising to you afterwards.
You can do one.
What's your feelings on an afternoon like this, to see Norwich win in such dramatic fashion, but to see Coventry lose in quite the way they did?
Well, I mean, as you did, Connor, I predicted a Norwich win pre-match. Nearly said Coventry, but no, I did predict a Norwich win. So in the final analysis, we were proven right. But the manner of it, I have to confess, there was a little part of me thought, I cannot believe what I've seen there. When it purely because in all the years I've been doing this job, not once have I seen a Cov win. So maybe I thought the time had come, but that's to take nothing away from Norwich. Clearly, my allegiances are now with Norwich in terms of I want them to do as well as they possibly can from a purely professional point of view. So it was very swiftly past that feeling of, oh no, I'm absolutely distraught, and it moved on to, oh no, I've now got to rewrite the pointers. So that was my overriding emotion. But there was a part of me, just because it's my hometown, it's my team, and I've just been in Cov for 2 days actually visiting family, so maybe that affected me a bit in terms of the Coventry allegiance. But there was a genuine sick feeling when Forson put that first goal in, but I've been doing this long enough now, so I'm not sat here feeling that I won't be able to sleep tonight for my disappointment. So no, fair play. No, it was, and obviously in the bigger picture, which is why we're all here, it's a great result for Norwich, and could be transformational for the player in terms of Amankwah Forson, but who knows now? Norwich are 4 points off the top six as we sit here tonight. They've had a 10-point from 12-point festive haul, and for the second home game in succession, they've dug deep and shown a lot of character. And who knows what that does now in terms of, as I said to Johannes, any given season, you look back and there's moments, there's games, there's moments within games, and it takes you on a different trajectory. And we may. Still feels probably a little bit optimistic, but we may look back and feel this was a bit of a turning point in terms of the season. So, mixed emotions, you could say, but I am actually coming round to the view that it's a good day for Norwich.
Have you ever had a manager apologise to you before?
Well, to be fair, he apologised after the CBS game when Norwich won their 1-0 that day. Maybe not apology, but he was kind of...
He wanted it in that day, didn't he? Right?
Yeah, but as I said to him tonight, as in response to that apology, fake apology that it was, and what he said at the CBS, the same thing. I said, your need's greater than mine, and that's probably where I'm coming at it from. So, it's pretty unusual. Yeah, normally it's the other way around, and us having to apologise to managers for things that we have seemingly done to annoy them. But he can apologise all he wants, but I don't think he'd be too upset tonight, as I am not, to be fair. So it's as I wrote in those revised pointers, there's been some special times at Carrow Road, and those minutes at the end today, that was quite spine tingling as well. So it's great to see, because we're all here because we want Norwich to have a very good season and building something that hopefully leads them back to the promised land and then keeps them there. So who knows? As I say, these games, these moments could be big, and it was at the end it was good to be part of it, but not in the immediate aftermath of that Amankwah Forson. I have to be brutally honest. No, I wasn't celebrating or punching the air when that went in. As good a goal as that was, and it was a fantastic strike. But I'll leave the jigs to Johannes.
Yes, indeed, and we'll come on to him and maybe his celebrations. But Sam, I mean, Paddy said there, it's the type of result that can spark a season potentially. It can just shift momentum ever so slightly, and we all know what momentum does in this league. But interestingly, Johannes, when he was speaking to our Chris Gorham at BBC Radio Norfolk post-game, actually said in terms of Amankwah Forson, it could be a career-changing moment. And I don't think that underplays it, because given what he's been through with his Norwich career, it felt like it was just sort of slipping into obscurity a little bit, and there had been a little bit of chatter around potential loans away and that sort of thing. It's moments like that if he can build on, could just completely change his trajectory.
Yeah, I think at the same time, if you had picked one player who was maybe least likely to score a double, it might have been him. And also probably if Torup had picked a player to give a double, to try and accelerate their Norwich career, it probably would have been him as well. So, yeah, in terms of who it was, I think that was the ideal situation for Norwich. And, you know, to be fair, we've seen the ability that he's got, and it hasn't been very often. It's been few and far between, and most of his good performances were at the start of his time at the club. But I think everyone knows that he's a pretty talented player, and looks like he could go on to be a pretty good one for Norwich. But so much of football is about confidence, especially for young players like him and players who are adapting to a new environment, new signing. So yeah, I think it's great news for him, and probably also great news for Norwich, because we've spoken a lot, and you spoke to Johannes in the pre-match press conference about the lack of midfield options that he's got at the moment. To now have one who presumably will be brimming with confidence, having got not only his first goal for the club, but two to win a game single-handedly. Hopefully now that gives him an extra option in that midfield where maybe he was struggling to find some. So yeah, I think it's good news for everyone, and yeah, as I said, so much of it is about confidence, and he'll take an enormous amount out of that. I think you could tell from his celebrations, both immediately after the goals and then with the fans afterwards, that he was absolutely delighted, and I'm sure that's the sense you got from him post-match as well. And I don't think it was just to do with the one game. I think that could be a really big moment for him. But equally, we've said that about players who maybe haven't kicked on so much. I remember we were talking about, lift off for Ante Sienats a few weeks ago, and maybe he's only scored, I think, once since then, or maybe he hasn't scored since then. So he's now got to go and prove it, and he's got to back it up. But as a first step, it's a huge one for him, I think.
Yeah, I'm still old enough to remember Ollie Johnson against Southampton. He came off the bench and scored two. So, yeah, it's not a given, but it does feel, Adam, after what's been, a difficult start for him. And Johannes was pretty candid a couple of weeks ago speaking about him. And I think this was his first appearance in 7 games. And I'm not sure he touched the ball many times beyond his 2 goals, but who cares? And it has been, difficult for him to adjust after his move from Austria. And I think at the time, where you look at his pedigree and the fact he played, Champions League, Europa League football, there was maybe a question mark of how Norwich City had been able to get the guy in the first place. And I think Paddy raised that point when he signed initially, and slowly we've been able to see, I think physically it's been a little bit challenging for him. So it can just take, football's funny in so ways. You can struggle for such a long period of time, but something like that, an injection, a shot of confidence in that way, can just lift you to levels that maybe you don't expect. And that's now the challenge for him, to make sure that this is the start of something, rather than, again, just maybe a footnote in a wider and bigger story that isn't as successful.
Yeah, and I think the timing of it is perfect, given they've got the FA Cup game next Saturday, which feels probably fairly likely that he'll start that game. So it's an opportunity for him to show his worth over, hopefully, maybe in 90 minutes, or obviously depending on if he gets subbed off, but at least a longer period of time than what he got today. And he obviously could show his quality in those couple of moments, particularly the first goal, which I think we all know that's how good a strike that was technique-wise. You've got to be pretty good to be able to pull that off. So it's been a strange career for him so far at Norwich. He started off so well in that Oxford 45 minutes, in which was a very drab Norwich showing. He was probably the one sort of good moment really from that game in the way he performed, and I think we all thought, okay, there's a player on our hands here. It just hasn't really worked out for him, and almost contrast it to the way that they lost the game at Cardiff. He was really at fault for both of those goals, and I think in that moment you sort of saw the frustration. I think there was that footage sort of on one of the club's on the ball sort of footage videos there, and you could see the frustration.
Brutal on him,
it was brutal on him. Duffy, I could sense the frustration towards him, and as a young player, you'd imagine that's knocked his confidence further. And I mean, Johannes sort of referenced it post-match, that it's difficult for players that even come in from England to adapt to a different city and different people. But for him, quite a young man coming from Austria and everything that brings, and having to adapt on the pitch and off the pitch can be tough. So I'd imagine that's been a difficult spell in his life anyway. But then obviously, the things on the pitch haven't gone his way either. So you'd imagine his confidence levels have been on the floor. So that hopefully will translate now that he's got that back from that moment, and he's going to be the one that Norwich fans are going to be talking about for the next week. Hopefully he can embrace that moving forwards into that cup game where he's got an opportunity now to really make a mark. And I really hope he can take it, because I think technically there's a very good player there. Yeah,
and I'm sure, Paddy, as he was coming onto the pitch, there would have been a fair few inside Carrow Road in that home end, seeing Forson, seeing Kay Gordon come off the bench, and maybe scratching their head a little bit and thinking, what are they trying to do here? Because with Forson, Adam's right. We asked Johannes a lot about the midfield and maybe the lack of options. Now Slimani is out for a period of time, which we'll come on to later, and his name wasn't even pushed forward in that conversation as a potential option. It was, these are the three we've got, and that's kind of set. And obviously he's played on the left, and he struggled a little bit at points. And maybe this is sort of the shot in the arm that he needed. But I think, and obviously the first goal is the one that's going to get talked about, but the second one, does he score the second one if he doesn't score the first one, if that makes sense, in terms of confidence? Because when that gets dragged across the edge to the edge of the box, you could see and have seen and saw it today even in certain moments, it's so easy to lean back, it's so easy to snap at that shot, to get emotional. He doesn't. It's the composure, and it takes a deflection, but it's that ability to hit it hard and to keep it controlled that means that the deflection takes it in rather than maybe takes it the wrong side of the post.
Well, I mean, as you said rightly, Connor, this is still a young player, but played Champions League. He made his Ghana debut start of last year, I think March of last year. The pedigree is there, absolutely, no doubt about it. You're not hitting those levels at this stage of your career if you don't have quality about you and technical quality, and we saw that in both goals. It's all those other elements that Adam has referenced that go with moving to not just England but the Championship, the off the field stuff that comes with it as well. And then you don't, albeit he did kind of in a very bad opening day experience at Oxford, he looked like he had something about him, and he built on that. I think in the League Cup, I think it was Stevenage off the top of my head, I think he was good that night. So he actually did maybe sell a lie to it's going to take time for these younger players, particularly coming in from overseas, because he did feel like he adapted. But then, and Johannes talked about it this evening actually, that the Crystal Palace game where if you remember, he dislocated his shoulder, it popped out, and then he showed his character, because I think I remember Johannes telling the anecdote that he's turned up next day for training, thinking he was going to get reports of he's had to go to hospital, he's going to be out for a length of time, and he was there and he was ready to train. And I think he trained. I think he might have been involved that following weekend. So, which is good as well, because it shows you the character of this guy. That he was desperate to still kind of play his part. But I think Johannes was more or less inferring this evening that did set him back. If you zoom out a little bit, and he hasn't been the same player since. And then of course with young players, confidence goes, and once confidence goes, it can be tough. And then you're almost scrapping for minutes off the bench and trying to do something, in contrast to what he did today. We've not seen that impact anywhere near when he's had these cameos, and then the cameos getting less and less. You've seen it kind of with Kay Gordon to a degree as well, that if these players don't grasp the limited amounts of minutes off the bench, you swiftly get pushed to the margins, and of course then you get senior players back from injury all the time, and particularly then if the team start to perform, start to pick up results, it's very hard then from your position on the margins, on the periphery, to force your way back in. And I think Johannes said there's been 4 or 5 games maybe where he's not had a minute. He's been in the matchday squads, hasn't got on.
This was his first in 7.
Exactly. So in that context, to come on and do what he did, and just instinctive finishes as well, which is good as well. Maybe that's what he needed. It wasn't put through on goal. He's got the keeper coming out. He's got time to think about it, and maybe all those doubts that have crept in maybe would have bled into his decision making. It was just instant. The ball rolled back. You've got to hit it first time, execute that, and he did magnificently for the equaliser. And off the back, to take your point, off the back of that, he's probably just thinking, get the ball to me again, and very similar position on the pitch. Central, just edge of the box, came onto it. And after the first goal, I think it was a touch of fortune. I think I've at least one Cov deflection, maybe even 2, just the wrong foot. The keeper.
Yourself that.
No, that's the facts of the matter. No, I'm not. We've parked that anyway. This is all about Norwich now, Connor. But I think there was a deflection, so it slightly diverted the flight of the ball. But to take nothing away, and then the scenes, it did, maybe it's because we've just seen him back at Carrow Road recently, but Mario Vrancic, it was very Sheffield Wednesday-esque in terms of the scenes with the groups of players, with the fan base, just delirium, just elation. And that's why, to go back to the first point, what can this do for him, but also Norwich and their season. But, tremendous. And like Johannes said, he tends to want his players to steer clear of maybe the media and social media and not get caught up in that. But tonight he said he wanted Forson to soak everything in and all those positive moments and love that will be shown for him. And let's just hope, as Sam rightly said, maybe there was a false dawn with Antti Cernach when he scored 3 goals against Plymouth and Luton back-to-back, and that hasn't happened for him, that Forson doesn't go the same route, and that we look back in April, May, and this was like the highest point of his season, and the rest of it was, sadly not what any of us would have hoped for, but that's for him now to grasp it. And I think what this will do now is it will, like I said earlier, you get pushed to the margins when you don't perform or you don't grab your moments. He's very much done that this afternoon. You'll now find, I'm sure, starting with Brighton, he might push himself up now, Johannes' thought processes, and then it's for him then. If he can start to replicate this on a consistent basis, much like we talked about with Oscar Schwartau very recently, these young players can quickly accelerate forward into the minds of starting options rather than, as you rightly said, when he was coming on today, did anybody in that stadium really think Amankwah Forson was going to be the match winner? I don't think so.
I don't think he thought it. I'd have been shocked. I'd have been shocked if he thought it, to be honest. And that sort of surmises what a stupid game this is at point, because you can pick elements out of it and tactical elements, and you can go really in depth with stats and numbers. But sometimes it just takes something to drop for you, something to fall for you. So, a wonder goal from the edge of the penalty area, and everything's transformed. And then suddenly you're freer, and you aren't worried about what's gone before and the lack of confidence and where you are. You're standing in the group, and that desperation to make an impact off the bench, and then then a second goal can come along. And Sam, I mean, I used to sit at the block of the stadium that Norwich celebrated that goal in, and I'm not speaking out of turn. It's quite a calm area of the stadium. It was, when I moved into it, it was sort of a revamped family area. They gave away a lot of season tickets in that League One campaign to try and get people in there, which is part of the reason why I started going. So not the most raucous part of the stadium is to think about it, but you look at the celebrations and you see the mass pile on, the advertising hoardings on the floor. I think a steward got pulled over a gate. There are people rushing to the front. I mean, that beautifully paints the picture of what Carrow Road was, which was absolutely bouncing. I mean, I don't know about you, gents, but and Paddy's probably right. It probably is that Farker campaign. I've not heard Carrow Road like that for a moment in a long, long time. Yeah,
when I was speaking to people outside the stadium just after, I was sort of asking them, can you remember the last time there was something like that? And one of them said they haven't been that excited since Wembley. So clearly a moment.
They sleep through the Farker era.
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, but I think it does go to show how big a moment it was, and even in a season where maybe getting a late win against Coventry might not end up being that consequential. It might end up being the difference, being honest, between 9th and 11th, but I think it highlights that not everything in football is about big, long-term, broad visions and millions of pounds. A lot of it is just about that moment when you're stood in the stand and or sat in the stand, and you get taken off your seat, and there's that moment of everyone jubilant together. But it definitely did feel like there was absolute lift-off in that stadium. I actually thought, similarly to what you said about the River End, the people in front of us, it's usually quite a measured part of the stadium, but even they were getting involved in the chants towards the Coventry fans at the end there. So I think it really it reminded everyone of why they love coming to football. And as much as we talk about bigger projects, and so much of it has been about communication and the feeling and the connection between fan base and players and head coach and all of these big things. So much of football is also about how a game can can flip on its head within 4 minutes. And I thought that was illustrated today quite beautifully. So ideally, they go on and achieve something this season, and we're saying, well, thank goodness they managed to get those 3 points against Coventry. But even if not, I think those fans have now got a memory that they'll look back on for a long time to come. And that's what football can give people.
But also for this group, Adam, because if you think about a lot of what people felt towards that Farker team, I don't want to keep going back to that because Paul Lambert's team was the same, and Mike Walker's team was the same back in the day. When you achieve those moments, those late winners, they're so important for building that sort of connection between teams and projects and coaches, I guess, as well. Because if you ask a lot of Norwich fans about Daniel Farker, of course they'll talk about the titles, but they'll talk about the late winners in that season: Nottingham Forest, Sheffield Wednesday, Millwall. It's the type of win that will do wonders for this group and how the fan base interacts and connects with it.
Yeah, you could see the sort of unity in the celebrations post game. Sort of they went around the stadium, and obviously the way they sort of pushed Forson forward, and just that kind of sense of everyone being on the same page, which we've seen glimpses of it this season, but I think those kind of moments just define a group, and also the fans can really see on the pitch that this team believes till the death. I think, as you mentioned there, the moments in the Farker season, you could sort of reel them off. The late winner against Bolton, the Nottingham Forest game, the Millwall game. There's so many moments that stick out even now. And I mean, this hopefully can be sort of the start of the Torup era and kind of having similar moments, because ultimately the teams that get success in the Championship generally have kind of that fighting spirit that even in those moments where they're not performing to their best, they can rally and get those moments that win games. And I don't really want to bring darkness to this podcast, but Ipswich kind of done that a little bit last season. You look at kind of their success, and it was built on a lot of late goals, late winners. And I'm just hoping that Norwich can use that now as a tool, because it feels like this is a big moment. Because as much as the 4-0 wins have been great this season at Carrow Road, and we've all kind of sat back and revelled and enjoyed the football on the pitch, you can't really sort of navigate those moments like today, because that 4-0 win, you remember it and it was exciting, but you don't look back at it and go, I remember who scored those goals. It's that game today. Everyone's going to be talking about Forson and what those moments will provide for fans moving forward. So it's a big moment, and I only think that the unity and the feeling amongst the players, the coaching staff, and the fans will build moving forwards in a more stronger way.
I think it's the first time, Paddy, that we've seen Johannes, who's usually very non-emotional, so to speak. He speaks about the importance maybe of extracting emotions from it, and he's so calm and collected usually. You saw him on the pitch, bursting onto the pitch for the second goal. As you say, I think he was basically dancing, jigging at the full-time whistle. It felt like probably a big moment for him as well.
Well, I mean, that underlines the point. Have we seen that show of emotion from that man at any point previously in his Norwich tenure? I think, well, the answer is no. Wasn't quite Mourinho down the touchline, but it was
Wagner down the touchline.
Wagner, yeah, to be more relevant, more current. But that tells you what he was feeling inside, which he tends to be very good at masking, and it's very analytical. And to be honest, I asked him about it after the game, and he was very swiftly moving on to tell us that at 1-1 he's thinking, right, how do we protect this point now? We've got back in the contest, let's not lose it now. And it was almost, Duffy and McLean led the calls for, no, let's go for the jugular kind of thing. So, and he said sometimes you just got to let the players go and take the leash off sort of thing. And boy, did that pay off handsomely. But I like to see that. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't really want I don't think that the head coach or / manager who wears their heart on the sleeve and are constantly bawling and raving, whether that is externally in terms of dynamic with supporters or more importantly inside a dressing room. I think you'd rather have the analytical breaking down what's going on in real time, almost detaching yourself from that emotion, because I think that's going to lead to better decisions, coaching decisions, better results, better performances. But that said, I think there's always still a place for to see that raw emotion and what it means, and how much that these characters, him and his coaching staff, live it and put into the job. Yes, it's their careers as well, but they've come together in a common cause, which is to try and push Norwich forward now, and you can see what it meant to him today, and I think that's and again, full time whistle. There was some lovely scenes as well. And you can imagine when they got back to the changing rooms, what a place that would have been to be involved in. So these are special moments, and you just hope they can ride the wave now, because, as I say, it feels like they've injected momentum when the season had probably stalled a little bit running into the festive period. Some good results, some good performances, but the trend felt a little bit regressive, and now we look back and it's 10 points from 12, and and digging out results in the fashion they've done today. That all adds weight to the belief that maybe while this is still a transitional period for the club, they might be able to accelerate that transition, and who knows where that can take them this season. Yeah,
and there is a world, Sam, where we're recording this podcast and we're talking about a lot of different stuff, and quite frankly, who cares now? But that's I can almost hear the people shouting us. Who cares about the 90 minutes that preceded the 6 minutes of chaos? But there were still, I think, a lot of themes as to where this Norwich group is in terms of maybe the squad itself and the dynamic of it, and we'll obviously speak more about some of the individuals who are now playing a role and some who are no longer playing a role. But if Coventry, let's live in our hypothetical world for 2 minutes where Forson doesn't do what Forson did today, and it's a sadder world, that's for sure. But we're probably talking about a narrative of no real presence up front, all a little bit flat, an off day, and maybe some of the similar themes that we were against QPR. So it's amazing that a moment and moments can so drastically change probably everyone's feeling around it, because I'm sure at 90 minutes there were people leaving, really. So I hope they did manage to see the chaos that followed, but it could have been so different today, and for a lot of it wasn't great still.
Yeah, I think you're basically spot on about what you say the analysis would have been if Norwich hadn't managed to turn that game around, because although they did, to be fair, create a decent number of chances, it didn't feel like it was the same sort of free-flowing football that we've seen from them at times this season. I thought it was a very inconsistent performance, because actually there were 5 minutes probably before the Coventry goal where I was thinking actually they're moving it really, really well. They're interchanging quite well, and it looks like a team that's very well connected and sort of understand each other's movements and things like that. But before that, it was a bit of a poor quality game, to be honest. And then after the goal, Norwich reacted really, really poorly, I thought. So yeah, there probably were some concerns, especially for the majority of that first half. But it was improved in the second half, I thought. They did create some decent chances, and what I think Torop will probably love about it is the fact that they had so much control of the game, and obviously game state plays a decent part of that. And I think Frank Lampard admitted afterwards that he was happy to play the spoiler a little bit at Carrow Road, but also the fact that they had so much possession, they had so much territory. That's basically what Torop's system is designed to do. And although I'm sure he would have liked to see it executed a little bit more effectively, I thought tactically they were pretty good and fulfilled their roles quite well. So you could say that actually ultimately that pressure puts Coventry deeper and deeper in their own box. It creates a space for Forson, and actually that it wasn't just some isolated moments of brilliance. But equally, I do agree that we would have seen it as an off day if Norwich didn't end up winning it. But as Gino De Campo says, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. So as you said, sometimes it's not about the hypotheticals. Norwich managed to get the win over the line, and although it was probably a display that was somewhere around average, they managed to get a win that I'm sure everyone will be pretty happy with, and they maybe won't remember how concerned they were with the performance at half-time.
I always love the highbrow philosophical references we crowbar into this podcast. They're always of a high standard. Adam, just I guess to maybe finish on the game, Onel Hernandez deserves some credit, doesn't he? Because as that ball gets put in the channel in behind Latabodiere, who I know you've put a picture on the PinkUn channels of him goading Marcondes essentially after maybe a penalty that wasn't given correctly. But many players with the defender first probably might have given up on that. To still have that desire so late in the game to go and press and to go and win it and to go try and fashion something. And even at the point maybe where I certainly thought, oh no, he's slowed down, he's invited him back in, probably worked in his favour. But then to have the composure and awareness to find something, and often his end product is criticised, and maybe he is criticised for not doing enough and not having enough of an impact in terms of real output, significant output. So he's worthy of some credit, isn't he, for his role in that second goal?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, his cameos off the bench recently have been pretty productive. You kind of look at the assist he provided for Nunez for the goal against QPR. There was the one in the Luton game which he put across for Signs, and it feels like those numbers are starting to gradually grow. I mean, the goal output obviously needs to be addressed still. I think, was it over 5 years since he scored at Carrow Road now, and as a winger, I mean, what was it, 200 games he's now played for the club, or 201 after today. I think there's only 15 goals. I think he'll probably know inside that that's maybe not high enough in terms of output. But his impact was shown, and his desire and his passion and everything he brings to this, team in terms of just drive to create that goal. Get down the side, and sort of power and the strength he sort of showed to knock him off the ball, and then obviously provide the ball back across for Forson, which was on the money for him to finish it. Yeah, he does deserve some credit, because without that, they only get a point out of that game, and we're all again viewing this game very differently, and this podcast is still very different to what it is now. So, but yeah, in the moment, to be fair, when he got into the box, I thought, what's he doing here? He's delayed it too long again, and it's going to be shut down. But just the composure he showed to sort of get the ball back across. I think that's a great moment for him as well. And again, we can speak about his performance against Luton, and maybe that wasn't the best, but in those sort of moments like today, he can still show his value for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to mention, which I thought was interesting before actually Norwich made the double change to bring on Forson, to bring on Cade Gordon, there was a long conversation between Torup and Wilshere, and Wilshere obviously is wearing an earpiece and is connected up to the sort of analysis, the analysts who sit just behind us actually inside Carrow Road, and I just wonder whether maybe there was something that they saw that then got passed down the chain to Torup that influenced those changes. And he spoke a little bit again post match about how they saw maybe there was some openings on either side to create 3 versus 2s if they got players in the right position, and that was partly why we saw Kenny McLean as part of a back 3, and why we saw Forson thrown on and Gordon thrown on. So amid the chaos, I think there was some pretty good reason. Whoever concocted that idea or spotted that idea deserves a huge amount of credit. So fair play, and what an afternoon it was. And that first part of this podcast has absolutely flown by. We'll be back in a minute to talk about what has been a pretty busy few days for Norwich City, 1 in, 1 out, and all the various stuff around this game as well. Borja Science will delve into all of that good stuff. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, brought to you in association with First Bus Norwich, and we've just about caught our breath and calmed down after the chaos that ensued at Carrow Road this afternoon, and we're going to start part 2 of our Just the Ticket segment, which is of course sponsored by First Bus, and it's the segment where we pick out players who were just the ticket. Clearly there's an easy bus pass to give someone here, an easy answer to give it. So I'm going to set the rules that we're going to ban Forson for obvious reasons, because when I go to Paddy in a second, he's got the easiest answer ever in this segment's short history so far. So you're not allowed Forson. So of the remaining field that there is to choose from, and I guess you could probably lean into Luton a little bit as well if you want, given that we haven't recorded since that. Who is just the ticket for you?
Well, I was actually going to lean into then and QPR, and that leads me to Marcelino Nunez, who I think has been over the piece. You talked earlier, 10 points from 12. He's been pretty integral to that haul, I think. Either taking matters into his own hands, the goals QPR and Luton, but just his general play now, and what a key figure. And that was underlined when he was out for quite a prolonged period, as was McLean. But I just think in terms of how they want to progress the ball, the quality they want to show on the ball, he is... Yeah, he's probably an indispensable cog now in terms of the midfielders he's got in the mix, certainly of the available ones. But because obviously there's 1 or 2 unavailable at the moment through injury or fitness issues. But yeah, I mean, obviously there was those reports, wasn't there, prior to the game, potential interest that whether there is or isn't from Everton. I think the reality is clubs higher up would be looking at him now and thinking, look at his age profile, look at the type of midfielder he is, in the right environment. a head coach maybe wanting to play the game as Torup sees it. I think he's probably one who could step forward and play at a higher level. So, by no manner of means am I touting him for an exit in January. I don't think that will occur. But I think we were there last summer. There was a little bit of talk, Turkey interest there, which Norwich shut down. But I think we'll be back there again this coming summer if he maintains what he's doing, stays clear of injuries, plays lots of games. It was only the coat of paint today that denied him another assist, that Kenny McLean header from his corner. Just quality through his performances over this festive period. Maybe not today was his best of the festive period. A little bit lax occasionally in his passing, but overall he is no doubt just the ticket.
Lovely stuff, yeah, and I think for all the attention that maybe Borja Sainz's contract situation has got, he's in a very similar boat, isn't he? He's 2026, I think, from memory. So, yeah, Norwich probably need to get something moving in that direction, given where he's at the moment. Sam, let's come to you. Who's just the ticket for you? And again, you can extend this into Luton if you wish.
Yeah, I'm going to say Ben Krezene, who I think has actually been very good since coming into the Norwich team. Obviously benefited from that suspension to Jose Cordoba, but given how much faith Torup has had in him this season, I think it says a lot about Krezene's performances that he's still in the team and Cordoba's on the bench. I think he's been good in pretty much all areas. Really, he's shown technical quality. Physically, he's really up for the battle. And although he's maybe not, I don't think he's one who you'd stereotype as a sort of physical player who wants to be sticking his head in. But I think he actually is, and he's done a lot of that. And I just think he's been consistent. He's been solid for the last few games, and after a really positive start to life at Norwich, I felt he was fairly hard done by not to be in the team, and that's not necessarily the wrong decision. I think he's had some really tough competition in Doyle and Cordoba, but I think he's got to be commended for the performances that he's produced over the festive period, and long may it continue, because I think Torup has said before he loves to have those types of headaches. It'll be interesting to see how long Krezene can stay in the team, but as long as he does, I think that's just going to continue to be evidence of how well he's playing, and I think he is playing really well. So, I think Krezene is just a ticket.
Yeah, good stuff. He's looked good, and it's allowed Norwich to get Callum Doyle back in centre back, and that relationship that he's building with Duffy, I think, has been quite good. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, you just mentioned him there. Shane Duffy for me is just a ticket. I mean, particularly that Luton performance for me, that's up there with some of the better defensive performances I've seen from anybody recently in a Norwich shirt. I mean, he was an absolute colossus that afternoon. The block at one point in the game, which basically preserved them at least the 3 points. I just think, for me, he's probably a serious contender for one of Norwich's player of the seasons. If you take away Signs and, his impact in sort of the early patch of the season, for me, he's been the standout player throughout this campaign. Obviously had his difficult moments last year on and off the pitch, and, you sort of wondered whether he actually really had a serious go at being a Norwich City player this season, and I think that was quite evident even at the start of the campaign. Torup's made it pretty public. I think Duffy's made it pretty public that they both kind of had their concerns about whether they'd be the right fit moving forward. And when you sort of take away what he doesn't have in his locker, he's maybe not the most comfortable on the ball. I think he's improved a little bit on that. But, when you take that away, when it's just pure his bread and butter, defending, I don't think there's too many better players in the Championship in terms of that in defence, and just his leadership, particularly now they've obviously lost Ashley Barnes from the dressing room, which we'll talk about probably in fairly short order. He's kind of one of those leaders now in that group, and I think he is the kind of player that those younger defenders can look up to with, he's just a really good role model, I think, for those moving forwards in terms of what he's doing on the pitch at the moment. So long may that continue, because if he continues to put in those performances, then I think Norwich will get a lot more points this season than maybe we feared they would at one point.
Yeah, he deserves a lot of credit, I think, because we were in Austria for that game against Hoffenheim, and you think Cordoba pulled out that day fairly late, I think, with a slight thigh issue. Kellen Fisher had tonsillitis, and Hannes Torup went with Brad Hills and another, I can't remember who else he went with, but he didn't go for Shane Duffy, and it might have been Hanley, yeah. And there was a lot of anger, I think that's probably fair to say, from Duffy about that decision, and I'm sure a lot of pros, given what happened to him at the end of last season and all the controversy, I'm sure, Sam, if you would have stood outside the away end at Leeds and polled all of those Norwich fans, would you keep Shane Duffy next season? I'm not sure you'd have got 10 who maybe their last name weren't also Duffy who would have said that they would have done. So it could have, easy for him to say, I've had enough, I'm out of here. The fact that he's knuckled down, fought hard, and has now played more minutes under Johannes Torup than any other Norwich player, I think is a pretty tremendous story. And yeah, he's been good this season. I'm going to go for a slightly different answer. I'm going to say Josh Sargent because he's obviously, well, maybe his groin more specifically, which makes it a bit odd, but the fact that it's now in a position where hopefully he's going to be able to play, because I think you look at where Norwich City are from an attacking perspective, and goodness me, have they missed? It felt like they've missed him significantly more in recent weeks. I think Sienats looks increasingly tired, to be honest, but today I just felt there were moments where positionally he was just 2 or 3 yards off and short pretty consistently, and no surprise maybe to see him get subbed off early. So the fact that he's now coming into this team, and again a team that we're talking about having 10 in 12, I think that's quite an exciting proposition to have him back and his energy. Just hope that Norwich aren't in a position where they're going to have to put plenty of load on him, which probably acts as a really nice and unplanned segue into a debate about strikers, which I think we're about to have, because Paddy, earlier this week, Ashley Barnes came on at Luton. There was a lot of talk about maybe the impact he did or didn't create, and we could debate that. And if he was still here, we might still be having that debate. But 24 hours later, I'm sat on my sofa going bunting mental, watching the darts, and suddenly he's gone, and that is how quick football moves. So in terms of that decision, probably not a surprise that he's gone for all of the context that I think we've had around him and the experienced players, Fashnacht and obviously Grant Hanley, maybe the one remaining still, who we probably will have this conversation at some stage potentially over this month. But the club that he's left to, I guess, is probably a little bit of a shock once you take sort of the emotional, sentimental elements out of it. And then I guess we could probably have a wider debate about where Norwich City go from here in terms of strikers, because it seemingly looks like they're not going to do one as a direct replacement for Barnes in this window.
Well, on the basis of when you went and had a chat with Johannes pre-match, yeah, he more or less ruled that out, and it was again wrapped around a little bit like the lad they brought in on loan from Villa, Lewis Dobbin, a player who's capable of maybe operating in all 3 of those positions rather than a specialist, because we said it on the team news this afternoon. The reality is, just talked about him in the last segment there, when Josh Sargent is fit, he will be the number 9. He will be the central pivot in that 3. So much like last January, if you go back to bringing in Sidney van Hooijdonk post Adam Eder, he didn't get a kick because Josh Sargent was fit, available, scoring goals, and really he was the difference between why that team got themselves into the top 6 and not. So on the basis that Josh Sargent remains fit, or at least plays the bulk of these remaining games, I think a direct striker replacement sourced in January isn't going to have a lot of football. So that I can see the logic in that, in terms of that aspect. But obviously then it does raise the intriguing possibility of what they are looking for in terms of profile of attacking player. Probably, we know the links to Jurasek are there, and those discussions continue, that dialogue continues, and maybe that's the answer they're looking to the question, what does their striking options look like? So, but moving off there onto Barnes, yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me that he left. The swiftness of it, the abruptness of it, yes, and also his end point destination, a promotion chase in Burnley. I don't see him, I mean, he's been on the bench today. They've had a derby win at Blackburn and he's not kicked a ball, and I would be surprised if that isn't his remit between now and the end of the season. Maybe they're just looking at it in terms of the odd game or 2 that he can come on, affect it. I mean, we saw him affect most recently the QPR game. That was his nuisance value in the box, which led to Hernandez laying it back for Nunes to score that 89th minute equaliser. A lot of that was sourced in Ashley Barnes' nous and pinning defenders, and he can still do that in the right setting. So in the short term, I can kind of see it from a Burnley perspective. I certainly don't see him becoming a starter for Burnley, because I think those days are long gone. And likewise, if Burnley do get themselves out of this division, I don't see him kicking a ball in the Premier League. I think it's more, he's got the 18 months now to take him probably to a point where maybe he hangs up his boots, if not sooner, and moves into a coaching. And he is Burnley through and through. That's in his DNA. And are they looking at it that could be a coaching pathway for him? I don't have any prior knowledge of that, but that seems to me to make sense in terms of why this deal might have got put together in the way it's done, rather than purely just what he can do on the pitch now, which, as we saw, the Johannes wasn't wasn't that particularly impactful. And yeah, in terms of how Johannes mapped it out, it was pretty evident he wasn't going to feature. He's not a Johannes type of forward, is he? Let's be honest, or a Johannes type of attacking option. So it was really a case of where he goes rather than if he goes, and I think that applies equally to Grant Hanley as we move through January. And so surprising elements in terms of his end point and how swiftly it came to pass, but not really, because the parameters from Johannes had already been set out with Hanley, with Fashnak, and with Barnes, that these players are on the periphery if they want to go and get regular football, and there's interested parties, then there's deals to be made, and 2 of those 3 deals have been made.
Yeah, agreed. And I think if we reflect on him and his time at Norwich, Sam, I think and this isn't a point about Ashley Barnes, I don't want it to be, but I think he is almost symptomatic of maybe the flaws of that window under Stuart Webber and David Wagner, where they did load the team with a lot of experienced players, and it was very short term, and it was very much about trying to get up through the Championship, and a lot of that Norwich are paying the price for now, right, in terms of guys that are at the latter stage of their career, I was trying to word that diplomatically, who are on big money and who are not playing, and they've got they did have a lot in that category. Fewer now, and they'll obviously have even fewer when they get to the summer. But for him, there were good bursts, particularly when he played up front with Josh Sargent, but just never really worked, did it, for him here?
Yeah, I think it's basically. I mean, he started off quite well. It's basically just, and this isn't necessarily faulting him. He arrived at the club when he was, I think, 33, and now he's 35, and it's natural that he's going to decline over that period. But it has been, for me, just a sort of steady decline. Obviously, hastened quite a lot by that significant injury that he got at the end of last season, and an almost polar opposite change in head coach. So yeah, I could see why they did it in the first place.
In terms of why they signed him initially, do you mean?
Yeah, I'm not saying it was the right decision, but David Wagner clearly wanted experience. He told us beforehand that he wanted experience, and Ashley Barnes is a free agent. I'm not sure putting 2 years on the table was maybe the ideal decision, but ultimately it was a very short-term season last season, and whether you agree with that or not, that was what they decided they wanted to do. They wanted to put everything behind getting promoted, and in that sense, it wasn't too bad, because he was okay for a decent period of time, and him and Sargent were quite a good duo early on in their partnership. But ultimately, as soon as Johannes Torp walks through the door, for all the talk that there was of making it work and the role that he could play, and obviously Torp's never going to come out and say he doesn't really fit and might leave if there's an opportunity. Obviously he's opened up that conversation in recent weeks, but he's not going to say that September or October when Barnes was returning from injury. But I think anyone who knew anything about the respective styles of Barnes and Torp knew it probably wasn't going to work. And although I think everyone acknowledges the sort of presence that he was in the dressing room, and Torp has only good things to say about him, it probably is the right decision for all parties. And although I agree with Paddy that he's probably not going to get much game time at Burnley, probably even less than he would have done at Norwich. I suppose for personal reasons it makes sense. It's obviously a club he loves as well. So yeah, I can see why it's been done, and I think, to be honest, Ben Napper and Norwich will be quite pleased that they've managed to get his wages off the wage bill, with Josh Sargent coming back this month.
Yeah, no disputing the type of character he was as well. As recently as New Year's Day, Shane Duffy was singing his praises in terms of what he brings to the group, and a lot of that, of course, is stuff that we don't see and fans don't see. But the fact that everyone spoke about it shows that he was very good in that element. I'm sure maybe for a Burnley side that is trying to get to the Premier League, that sort of boost and personality in a dressing room, that know-how, could be quite useful, even if maybe that on-pitch presence maybe isn't quite where it used to be. And it's going to be really intriguing to see what he does in the summer when that 6-month deal at Burnley is up. So we'll see how that all unfolds. And of course he'll play Norwich City later on in the season. So I'm sure he'll be pretty keen to make his mark in that one. One out, one in, Adam. Lewis Dobbin. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have any sort of hot takes on him after seeing him today. It's quite a difficult sort of environment to really assess him as a player, but it's clear from what Johannes said on Friday, a very different profile maybe to what they've got in the building at the moment. Someone who's going to run beyond and stretch defences, which is probably what they needed, an injection of pace, really.
Yeah, he's definitely a different option to what they already have in the building, and you sort of preempt a little bit with potential repercussions of signs being out for a while. If the ban does eventually come, they're going to be a little bit light in those areas. He feels like an option that could play. Obviously, has played in the Championship a little bit this season. Maybe not worked out from at West Brom, and sometimes these situations just don't work out for certain individuals. I mean, he had a pretty decent productive spell at Derby in League One a couple of years ago, and I think there's clearly a talented player there. He's got some Premier League games under his belt at Everton, and anybody who's watched his goal against Chelsea, the technique to finish that goal, I know it was a couple of years ago now, but he's obviously got a decent profile and a decent pedigree in the game in terms of younger talent coming to the club. And I'm always one of these kind of people that's not quick to judge individuals. You look at sort of Pookie, and when he arrived, everybody was like, "Oh, why have we signed him?" His record's not great, but that ended up turning out to be a pretty productive piece of business off the basis of that. So it worked out all right. And yeah, I mean, obviously you look at Torp and the sort of individuals and the way he's managed to develop a lot of these younger players that were on the periphery or haven't really played a lot of football, and someone like Kellen Fisher has completely burst on the scene. So I think anybody that's sort of judging him based on his record is a little bit quick to be doing that, because I think there's clearly a player there that Norwich Torp likes, and I'm intrigued to see moving forwards what he can bring, because there was little moments in the game today when he came on. I mean, there was the one where I think he drew the free kick sort of down the right channel where he sort of managed to get past a man, and if he can inject that pace, that dynamism into this group that they don't really have at the moment, I think that there's a good player there potentially moving forwards that can give them that different option. So yeah, obviously the proof's in the pudding, and his performances will be the deciding factor on that. But it's ultimately a low risk signing. He's only on loan. You'd imagine that the fee's not massive and his wages won't be as big as some of those individuals like Fashnak that they've managed to shift on. So for those purposes, if it works out well, then happy days, have got themselves a good player on the books for 6 months. If it doesn't, then you just say goodbye, and that's the end of that, really.
Yeah, exactly, and it just gives them a short-term option to maybe then go and be able to do something permanently in the summer that's a bit more long-term as well. And that's what I think maybe sometimes gets lost a little bit with loans, is that they are sometimes a stopgap, because you've got a youngster who maybe is not quite ready in the here and now, but potentially 6 months, a year down the line is, and they just sort of fill that hole for a little while. Or someone who maybe you want to get in the summer on a permanent basis isn't quite available. It just gets you through then and provides a slightly different option. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does and how much game time he gets. I would imagine with Borja Sainz's in what is likely to be a 6-game ban, probably quite a bit in the coming weeks. But Paddy, just finally on January, I mean, how do you see it shaping up from here from a Norwich City perspective? Because I think the anticipation was that they might be quite busy for Norwich, and there might be quite a few players in quite a few positions. It's been a busy few days, yeah. So just sort of map out where you think we are and where you think we could be in the coming weeks from a Norwich City perspective. Difficult to say, because I'm sure that some situations within that are pretty fluid.
Yeah, I think fluid's probably the good buzzword here, because having said that, I mean, I'm thinking hypothetically as I'm talking there, the Hanley situation, but I think the answer's already in the building there, and we saw him on the bench today, Brad Hills. I think that's how they'd go with that. So that wouldn't necessarily trigger a chain reaction, but I mean, it's clearly every time we get a touch point with Johannes and he's asked about this, it's quite clear that they're looking for that similar, I mean, whatever label you want to attach, winger / attacker / flexible forward option. That would seem to be the priority now. Prior to Dobbin coming in, somebody at before the Luton game was telling me it was wingers plural. Well, obviously they've got one in now, and we know they're after Eurosec. It's as tough a deal as that is to do by all accounts. So if that's the one they get over the line, then I know Johannes has made mention of the midfielder, i.e. the DM, but it would seem that might be, when he was asked and referenced to midfielder yesterday, I think his answer also included maybe one for the summer, which ties in with your point, Connor, that a lot of what they're doing recruitment-wise isn't necessarily all eggs in the January basket. There will be, there will be targets, or there will be profiles of player they want to move on in the summer, which clearly is an easier market, more availability, more time to do deals. So I think I'd probably row back on the sense that a DM or a whatever label you want to attach, a 6 is imminent in January. I think that could be one that moves on to the summer, and even the keeper, which we know that they're going to have to do something, because with Gunny's contractual status where it is, no active talks, no offer on the table, out of contract, now free to discuss him and his advisors with overseas clubs. They will need a new number one come the summer. So even that's probably a tricky one to do in January. We know there's been a bit of a pivot to maybe looking at the homegrown market, but can you bring in an option now and say to them, well, can you just sit there on the bench for 6 months until Angus Gunn moves on and then you can step forward? So even that might be a tricky deal to put together and get over the line in January. So right here, right now, it feels like maybe a lot of recruitment focus will be on getting another wide player over the line, and then that wouldn't surprise me if that is probably it, which isn't probably what Norwich fans would want to hear, but that's the reality of the situation. This is, as Giannis keeps continuously telling us, it's about the strategy, sticking to the strategy, not as he when you put it to him yesterday with the Slimani situation, maybe do they need to then almost go into the market and look at midfield options? No, the strategy is set there. Ben Napper and him have shaped that strategy. They've got the buy-in from Atanasio and his group above them, and only players fit the strategy, which is the mid to longer term element of it. Younger players they can develop, project players. Will that change in January? And I think the reality is, in this market, you're not going to have an abundance of those players available. So, yeah, I think it's going to probably, as it stands, probably just going to be the focus on the top end of the pitch.
On Slimani, I think he's obviously an interesting one. They've got an option on him. There was some interesting quotes from Chris Wilder overnight about how he's not a big fan of Anis. So I'd probably stay clear of Chris Wilder, Anis for a little while. Do you think there's something that could be done there in this window?
Well, I mean, we know there's the structure of that deal is there that Norwich can trigger at the end of the season, but I question the timing of why. I don't know what context Chris Wilder was asked about. I think it might have been actually
they've got a few injuries. Yeah, so
Exactly. Well, he put it out firmly in that no, we're not going to recall, and but then he added his future lies away from here, didn't he? So that's pretty definitive. Sheffield United, Chris Wilder doesn't want him. Norwich very much do want him. The player wanted this move, wanted to be reunited with Johannes. So is there a scenario where they could pull that forward into January and actually trigger? Well, yes, because all parties seemingly are on the same page. Both buying club, selling club in this case in Sheffield, and the player, we assume, as he's getting lots of minutes, unfortunately now sidelined with the ankle ligament issue. But as he's shown for me over the festive period, really, that he felt like he had the hamstring issues that had sort of dogged him a little bit since he came here, were behind him, and he was really putting his mark on that midfield, and he looked like a real key player. And what I would say is, with his age as well, going back to the strategy as well, a 23-year-old with his pedigree, for the figures that Norwich have baked into that deal, I mean, it is a no-brainer. So, yeah, it's entirely feasible that off the back of maybe those Wilder comments, Norwich might look to try and accelerate that and do something in this window, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think there's been a lot of stuff about his fitness in the wake of New Year's Day. I think that's a little bit harsh because it is as you describe it, a slightly different injury. B, it came from like a corner situation, so I'd have to watch it back. But there is a part of me that wonders whether there was some contact from Morris, whether he stood on his foot and that sort of twisted his ankle. But also it was a very bad pitch at Kenilworth Road, and it wouldn't surprise me if you got your studs caught the wrong way that could have been an impact as well. So I think it's a little bit harsh to maybe factor this injury in with maybe the other ones that he's had and that sort of general injury point. But
probably also worth saying that given it, if he's costing 1.2 million, if he plays 20 games, it's not the end of the world, is it? You've got a pretty good option there for 20 games. So.
No, exactly. So we'll see how that unfolds, and obviously the situation with Grant Hanley in the background, and I'm sure there'll be some movement around some of the younger players and loans anyway. To finish the pod, Sam, and I don't want to end it on a negative point, but obviously there's a pause in Championship action. We haven't discussed Borja Sainz, but he has been charged now by the FA. We'll speak probably more about it next week when we know the full picture in terms of how long he's got and maybe the subsequent communications that have come out. Because again, unless any of you gents have seen footage that I haven't seen, then I think we're going to have a very similar conversation to what we did in the last podcast. So we'll just park that for now, but that is the situation we will talk about next week. I don't want to sort of end the pod on a sobering note, Sam, given everything that's unfolded today. But obviously we've got a pause in action for the FA Cup next week against Brighton, which is a standalone game, and we all love the FA Cup, and it'd be great if Norwich City could go and win that game, but not the be-all and end-all. But the next two Championship games for Norwich City, Sheffield United away, which I don't think Anis Ben Soleimani will be making the trip. I'd advise him probably not to. Yeah. And then Leeds United away. That's pretty tough off the back of this run.
Yeah, true, but I suppose if you're going to go into it in any form, you'd rather have a decent run of 10 points from a possible 12 going into those two games. And I suppose there's also just not really that much pressure on them at the moment. They're probably far enough away from the playoffs that, to be honest, they won't be going into it worrying about it too much. If they were, 7th, 8th, and they had the opportunity to make a real statement by getting into that top 6 with some decent results there, then maybe it would be a bit doom and gloom that at this perfect moment they had those two tough fixtures. But I think right now, when they're probably still trying to prove themselves more than achieve any sort of tangible Championship targets, I think they'll go into it in decent form and with a bit of confidence after this run of games. So it'll be interesting to see where they measure up against those sides. Obviously, they drew with both of them at Carrow Road, so it's not like they're a million miles away. But obviously, given the fact that Luton aside, Norwich have looked a bit of a different team away from home, it is quite a lot tougher of a test. And both of those teams, I think, have done well. They've done pretty well away and at home, but especially at home. So yeah, it will be pretty tough, but I don't think Norwich have too much to lose, and it will be a good marker of where they are and a marker of their progress after the decent results they got against those teams earlier in the season. So yeah, for me, there's nothing really to fear because there's nothing really to lose. But yeah, definitely a step up in the quality of opposition from maybe what they've faced over the last few weeks and months really.
Yeah, the thought of returning to Ellen Road after what happened in the playoff semi-final sends a bit of a shudder down my spine. Yeah. But there we go. We'll see how we go, and hopefully we can see the Norwich City side that we saw at Luton with that resilience and that strength that they can maybe get something out of at least one of those games, which I think would be very good and very good for this group. And they will go into it with a bit of momentum and confidence after a very good festive period and 10-day period or so where they've picked up 10 points from a possible 12, thanks to some brilliant work from fantastic Mr. Forson. That is where we will leave it this evening. Thank you, gents, for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching and for listening. We'll be back next week after that FA Cup game. We'll see you then.